All right, let's get right into it. We are talking about a moment in history when one of the world's most ancient and powerful institutions was frankly on the ropes. It was facing a full-blown revolution that was threatening to tear it completely apart. This is the incredible story of how the Catholic Church decided to fight back.
And this, right here, is the central question. I mean, really think about it. Imagine you're in charge of a global powerhouse, but it's being eaten alive by its own corruption, while at the very same time, it's under attack by a radical new idea. What do you do? Where do you even start? So, let's set the scene. We're in the mid-1500s. It's been about 30 years since a German monk named Martin Luther kicked off the Protestant Reformation by nailing his 95 Theses to a church door. Europe is in absolute chaos, and the Catholic Church is right in the eye of the storm. The thing is, the Church was fighting a war on two fronts. From the outside, you had Protestantism spreading like wildfire, challenging everything the Church had stood for centuries. But the threat from the inside? That was just as deadly. Corruption was everywhere. Church offices were being sold to the highest bidder. That's a practice called simony. And a lot of the clergy were, let's just say, not living up to their vows. So what's a centuries-old institution to do? Well, it launched one of the most remarkable turnaround campaigns in history. And this wasn't just some panicked, defensive reaction. No, this was a deliberate, carefully planned counterattack. We call it the Catholic Reformation, or, as you might sometimes hear it, the Counter-Reformation. So what exactly was this movement? Well, it pretty much boiled down to two main goals. First, clean up the mess inside the church, all that corruption we just talked about. And second, build a theological wall to rigidly defend its core beliefs from the Protestant challenge. It was a strategy for both internal renewal and external defense. And you really have to understand this two-pronged strategy, because it's the key to the whole thing. The church knew it had to do two things at once: look in the mirror and fix its own massive problems, and at the same time, look outwards and build an unbreachable fortress around its core beliefs. So let's break down how they did it, starting with that first part, cleaning house. Okay, so first things first, they had to tackle that internal rot. And the main engine for this huge cleanup effort was a historic meeting that would literally define the future of Catholicism, the Council of Trent. Now, this wasn't some quick weekend conference. The Council of Trent went on, with breaks, for nearly 20 years, from 1545 all the way to 1563. This was the top leadership of the church getting together to take a long, hard look in the mirror, face the music about the abuses, and figure out how to restore some integrity. And they didn't just talk, they took real, concrete action. They officially banned selling church offices, they cracked down hard on priests and bishops, reinforcing the vow of celibacy, and they reformed the whole system of indulgences, the very thing that got Martin Luther so fired up, making it clear that the money couldn't be used for the Pope's personal pet projects anymore. This was a direct answer to their loudest critics. But this reform wasn't just about changing the rules and stamping out corruption. It was also about something deeper, reigniting the spiritual fire of the church, which, let's be honest, many people felt had gone out. And this spiritual renewal, you can feel it perfectly in the words of mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila. She actually led her own reform within her Carmelite order, pushing everyone to get back to a life of intense, simple prayer. Her focus on having a deep, personal relationship with God was this powerful counterargument to the Protestant idea that the Catholic Church was spiritually bankrupt. Okay, so while all that internal house cleaning was happening, the church was also hard at work on the second part of its plan, building that theological fortress to defend itself from the outside world. Now, you have to realize, there was a fork in the road here, a moment where maybe, just maybe, some kind of reconciliation was possible. But the church made a choice. Instead of meeting the Protestants halfway or trying to find some compromise, the Council of Trent decided to double down, reaffirming every single Catholic doctrine the Reformers had challenged. The result was a divide that was now basically unbridgeable. On salvation, Protestants said faith alone gets you there. The church said, nope, it's faith and good works. On religious authority, Protestants said the Bible alone. The church said it's the Bible and our traditions. They went all in, reaffirming all 7 sacraments, including the very controversial idea of transubstantiation, the belief that the communion bread and wine literally become the body and blood of Christ. With these decisions, the split was permanent. There was no going back. But look, just stating your beliefs isn't enough, right? You need an army to defend them and spread the word. So the church created these brand new religious orders. You can almost think of them as spiritual special forces, designed for this new age of religious warfare.
And two of the most important were the Jesuits and the Ursulines. The Jesuits, founded by a former soldier named Ignatius of Loyola, were the ultimate soldier scholars. They built the best schools in Europe with the goal of raising a new generation of smart, dedicated Catholic leaders. The Ursulines, on the other hand, had an equally brilliant strategy. They focused on educating young girls, ensuring that Catholic beliefs were being taught and reinforced right at the heart of the family.
So the doctrines were set in stone. The new spiritual soldiers were trained and ready to go. But how was the church going to make sure that everybody actually followed the new rules? How would it enforce this newly hardened set of beliefs?
Well, it used two incredibly powerful tools. First, you had the Roman Inquisition, which basically acted like an internal police force, hunting down heresy and crushing dissent. And second, there was the Index of Prohibited Books, a massive blacklist of writings that were considered dangerous. If you're a good Catholic, you were forbidden from reading not just Martin Luther, but also thinkers like Erasmus, and even, famously, the astronomer Galileo. This was all about controlling the flow of ideas.
So after all that, what was the result of this huge counterattack? Well, the legacy of the Catholic Reformation literally redrew the map of Europe, and its impact would be felt for centuries. And you can really see the final score here. The Catholic Reformation was successful. It halted the spread of Protestantism and solidified the Church's power, especially in southern Europe, places like Italy, Spain, and Portugal. But it also cemented the division, leaving the north of Europe mostly Protestant, and Central Europe a fractured religious battleground. So, let's just quickly sum up the big takeaways. First, this movement locked in the religious split in Europe for good. But it also worked. It absolutely revitalized the Church's spiritual energy and discipline. And by cleaning up its own act, it guaranteed its survival as a major political and cultural force in the world. When you go back and look at that two-pronged strategy, fixing the inside and defending the outside, it's pretty hard to argue with the outcome from their perspective. The Church had pulled itself back from the brink of total collapse. But that success came with a huge price tag. The cost of survival was the permanent shattering of Western Christianity, a division that would fuel wars, politics, and identity for the next 400 years. Which leaves us with one final big question to think about. Was this whole thing primarily a genuine, deep spiritual awakening, all about bringing people closer to God? Or was it, at its heart, the ultimate act of self-preservation, a powerful organization doing whatever it took to survive? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. And that's what makes it all so fascinating.